Thank you very much. That's what we need to do, is clear it up. Very good.
Can I ask one thing though?
Just since the subject came up, I'm going to do a little monologue here. You folks have probably never heard the real story behind the Freeman incident. So I'd like to tell you from my perspective. I've been in the radio business for a long time, on the internet and so on. I've been a patriot for a long time. Kind of a lazy patriot. I pick the battles that I think I can get something done with. And I heard about these Freemen over in Roundup, Montana. And I heard that they had evidence that the Montana state government had been hijacked, and that there was a conspiracy to control the elections and so forth, and that they had evidence on a CD-ROM about the money issues, and that the money was being devalued. And they were making lots of noise, and I got caught in between that philosophy and the philosophy of John Trockman and his militia group over in Knoxon. He's talking about the lawful militia. And so I just took it upon myself to throw some stuff in my pickup and go over and interview and meet Leroy Schweitzer, which is the gentleman that Aubin was mentioning. And he showed me a lot of his evidence, and I said, okay, this has to come to an head some way. This has to be brought out into the public some way. People have to know the truth about this if you're going to get anything done. And Aubin, you were precisely correct. The Freemen were creating a credit currency based on exactly what the Federal Reserve has done, and they were issuing certified money orders based on that credit currency. And that is on the record of the court in Billings, Montana during John Trockman's trial, and I put it there. This was after this was all done. Because they asked me, the prosecutor asked me, well, why did you go over there, and what were the issues? And I told him I went to sell these guys some radios. I sold a certified, a notarized purchase order for $600,000 worth of this stuff, radio communications, to that group of Freemen. And they drew up that certified purchase order, notarized, and they drew up their certified money order to pay for that. And I brought it back, and I deposited it in a Glacier Bank right here in Libby, or in Eureka. And they said, well, we've got to send this for collection. I said, fine. We opened a regular passbook savings account and deposited that amount of money. They sent it for collection. Now let me ask you a question. If you write a rubber check, what happens to that check? Let's say you go to a local merchant, Montana Market up here, and you write him a rubber check. And the check bounces and it comes back. Who gets that check? The merchant gets that check back so that he can go back to the person that wrote that check and say, well, this bounced. Now what can you do to make it good? You're going to pay me in cash, or you're going to give me something of other value to make this check good on the purchase, otherwise I have to take the equipment back. Well, I hadn't delivered any equipment. It was on order, and I could have fulfilled the order. But the FBI stole the money order. They interfered in the lawful banking process and took that instrument, and I never saw it again. I was powerless to do anything about it. If I had that instrument back, I could have gone to Leroy Schweitzer and I could have presented that instrument and said, now, Mr. Schweitzer, we've got a binding contract here. And this instrument you gave me is no good. What are you going to do to make it good? And at that point, Leroy Schweitzer would have exercised the lawful liens that he had against the agents of government that did this to us. And he would have hit their insurance companies, their bonds, he would have taken their homes, he would have directed the sheriff to go confiscate enough personal property to make good on those. Now, here's another upshot of this whole thing. You remember a few years later when the government of Mexico defaulted on a loan for $40 billion. Do you remember that?
92?
Yeah. You know what instruments were used to pay off that debt? They sent a courier to Mexico with Leroy Schweitzer's instruments, and that's what they used to pay that debt back. Schweitzer was operating under the UCC, the same laws that the Federal Reserve operates under. And my whole purpose was to blow this all out into the open. And after the major media, right while we were in the jail for 13 days, The minute we got there, they had these stories all canned that we were going to kidnap a judge and hang him while filming it with videotape to intimidate whoever. What we went to the jail for was, I had loaned one of these radios to a friend of mine, and he loaned it to one of the freemen. I was over there selling radios, remember? And they wanted to find out how they worked. So he took it for a demo, and those two freemen went to town, and they didn't have a license on their pickup. The cops arrested them, threw them in jail, confiscated all their stuff, including that radio, and we weren't getting anywhere with the freemen at that point. You know, we'd done what we came to do, and we were headed back for Eureka, but we wanted that radio back before we came. We walked in the jail, three of us, and one of the guys, Cajun James, he's not from here anymore, had a .45 on him. But there was a sign in the jail that said, "No firearms beyond this point." So he stayed out in that vestibule, and we walked in and started asking questions. And we no sooner got the words out of her mouth than Buzz Jones came through a steel door with a shotgun in hand, and he said, he pushed us up against the wall, and he said, "I've got a shell in the chamber, and if you move, I'm going to put it right through both of you." And it just deteriorated from then. We completely cooperated with them. They put handcuffs on our hands so tight that our hands turned blue. They kept us on the floor of their jail until midnight. This was about 7 o'clock in the evening. And then they took us in a blinding snowstorm with federal vehicles, federal marshals, chained up like, you know, leg irons and the whole thing, in a real circumspect route. It's a 40-minute drive down the highway to Billings. Took us 3.5 hours to get there. They went in every country road. Because of what the news media said, they thought they were up against World War III. And it escalated from one agency to another agency to another agency. And the only reason I'm standing here today is that God is in control, folks. So I spent 13 days in the Yellowstone County Detention Facility. Then they dropped all the charges and turned us loose. And you know, just to show you how bad the corruption is, that 93 diesel Chevy pickup had a split bench seat. So I had a 10mm Glock handgun that I carried everywhere. And I just took it off and jammed it down between the seats. That's what my habit was when I was going somewhere that I knew I wouldn't need it. Good thing I did that. Anyway, I locked the pickup and left it run. And after they arrested us, they couldn't get into that pickup. I mean, here's all these high-powered cops, you know, they got all their things, but they couldn't figure out how to open the doors on that 93 pickup. So they came in and asked me for the keys. I said, sure. And the guy brought this key ring right here. He brought it in, and he says, which one of these keys is for that pickup? So I showed him, and he went out and opened it up. That was Buzz Jones, folks. When he saw that gun, he stuck it in his back here, and he tried to steal it. Now, they came out with a very lengthy, detailed thing of what they had confiscated out of these vehicles. There was 2 vehicles, my pickup and an old white car. But while I was in jail, I borrowed a pencil and some paper, and I started writing down an inventory. And I wrote every item. I knew exactly what I had with me. And I turned it in before they ever published their inventory on the record of the court. And you know that Glock never showed up on the inventory on the court? And when this was all over and they were turning us loose, I said, what about my Glock? What Glock? We never found a Glock. I said I had a Model 20 Glock, a 10mm with 4 clips, 15-shot clips. I want it back. Well, how do you know? How do we know you had a Glock? I said, here's the manufacturer's certificate of import showing my name registered on this Glock. Here you are. I want it back. You know, they had to shake Buzz Jones down and go get him to produce that gun and bring it back so they could give it back to me. And when I went there and collected this pile of stuff they had, it was there in the pile.